world of cable news screaming and social media echo chambers, it's easy to lose the signal in the noise. Every day, policy is debated, votes are cast, and your tax dollars are spent. We cut through the headlines to bring you the critical context you need, focusing on what's really going on in news and politics. Welcome to the Analytical Iowan Podcast. This is your daily dose of fact-driven politics. Let's analyze today's news. Here's Eric.
We are back on the Analytical Iowan Podcast. It is Thursday, November 20th, as you are listening to this. And of course, we got a lot to talk about. Now, the big news came out yesterday. That was that Donald Trump signed the Epstein file release bill. Now, that was a surprise. I did not expect him to sign it. I figured he was going to wait the bulk of the 10-day review period that he is allowed. Not counting Sundays, of course, where he can look over whatever the bill is and then decide to sign it. Now, we know Donald Trump wouldn't actually read it or dig into the bill himself. I just thought for sure he was going to take those 10 days, wait till Congress left for Thanksgiving, and then veto it while Congress was out of town, trying to stall out their review process. Now, one of the things they can do is called a pocket veto. Now, this did not happen, but one of the things I thought he was going to try to do was this pocket veto, which is this is how normally the process works for signing a bill. Congress passes it. It goes to the president's desk. He has 10 days to sign it, veto it, or ignore it. Again, not counting Sundays. And if he signs it, it becomes law. If he vetoes it, he has to send a reason back to Congress why he is vetoing it. And they are on the clock for having so many days to review it and pass it around his veto. Now, they can't amend it when they pass it around his veto because that would make it a new law. They would have to pass it as is. But again, they would only have so many days. Or he cannot sign it. Well, if he doesn't sign it after 10 days and Congress is in session, it becomes law. But if Congress is adjourned, it's vetoed. And I know that's kind of confusing, and I don't know what the entirety of why it's set up that way, why there's this way around Congress and the veto process. But I thought he was going to try to do something like that when Congress goes away for Thanksgiving break. But the way they get around that is they never fully go on recess. They only ever take 3 days off at a time. I've talked about it before. That's where one of the members comes in for the House or the Senate, gavels it in, opens the chamber like they normally would, and goes, well, since everybody is here, if nobody objects, we're done for the day. We'll be back in 3 days. Again, wording might be slightly off, but that's effectively what they do. And I thought and they do that to get around like the pocket veto and some other things that require Congress to be gone because the Supreme Court has ruled previously that 3-day breaks are not enough to be considered adjourned. So I really thought he was going to try that, but no, he signed it. Now what happens? Well, Pam Bondi is on the clock, okay? She has 30 days to release the files. And from what I was reading, and it sounds like these files are supposed to be in downloadable and searchable format. Almost sounds like they're going to have a website of some kind created where they can go and look into everything that is going on. Okay. And there are going to be millions of pages of documents. And everybody thinks, or maybe not everybody, but a good number of people seem to think that there's just like one master list of all of the clients of Epstein. And there's really not. Those records are spread out across a lot of places. And it's going to take a lot of digging to figure out the master list of who is all involved. Now, part of the reason they have the 30 days is to design this website. Now, I saw some people were trying to say, don't give them 30 days, only give them 15. Unfortunately, the law is already passed. We can't change that 30-day time frame. It is going to be what it is going to be. They only have 30 days to get it signed or to get it released. But there are some limitations. they don't have to release anything under active investigation. And some people are thinking that because Donald Trump has called for a new investigation to any Democrats on the Epstein file lists, that may be enough for them to not release most of the files. And that's entirely possible. However, what they could do if they tried to pull that, there's going to be a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit, more than likely, over this. Because now, by this law, these files are supposed to be released to the public. And that should allow for Freedom of Information Act lawsuits, I would believe. And they're going to have to go in, and one of the things that potentially reporters or anybody else who is suing to get access to these documents could argue is that are these prosecutions real? Because that's what they're using as their cover, or is it a smokescreen? And the question that they can raise as to are they a real prosecution comes from the fact that Donald Trump himself went to Truth Social and asked for this investigation to be launched after publicly, repeatedly, and numerously saying that the Epstein files were a hoax. There was nothing to see there. Are we still talking about this guy? Other members of his administration had said there was nothing in the files, all of those kind of things. Now, when it comes to that, when they have that lawsuit, potentially, if a judge looks at it and goes, well, yeah, they're saying an ongoing investigation, and they pierce that veil and say, well, it looks like it's not really an investigation. We're going to allow the release of the files. One, it could hamper any investigation that is ongoing, which is true. But two, if they do charge anybody from it, I'm looking at it going, well, maybe a second judge would look at this and go, okay, a previous judge looked at this and ruled that there wasn't really a serious investigation going. This might even be malicious prosecution, and it may give way for these cases to get dropped. Now, I don't want to see anybody who is in the Epstein files who actually did things to children, get away with anything they've done. And that part would bother me if they actively charge people. But if they're only going after Democrats or people Donald Trump doesn't like, and they're not actively going against everybody who is in the files, I mean, that's kind of shitty, right? They should be going after everybody in the files. But more than getting them criminally charged and stuff, the biggest thing with getting these files out there and in the open is getting them to the public so we can end their careers, right? We're already seeing fallout from some of it. We're seeing, Prince Andrew. He lost his title as prince. He was basically shunned from the royal family. Now he still has a piece of property that he's allowed to live in on the royal grounds. But he's lost all of his titles. He's lost his ability to act like a royal, all of those things, because of his connections to Epstein. Now, this could be a thing where they knew about it ahead of time, but it wasn't public knowledge, so the royal family was ignoring it, and now they have to deal with it. We saw the one ambassador from the UK, the minute his name came out in the files, he lost his job. And just the list goes on and on of people who have been mentioned who are facing, all kinds of problems because their names are in the Epstein files. And that is kind of what we want to see. Now, certain Republicans, you're going to see in comment sections asking questions like, well, what if your favorite politician or what if your favorite celebrity's on there? Well, then they're no longer my favorite, period. If they're in there, then they need to be held accountable. If they're in there, depending on who it is and what they've done, there is a good chance I may never watch anything they're in ever again. If they're an actor or a TV star or what have you, a singer, maybe I never listen to their music again. I'm not beholden to them. I'm not going to sit there and frame my life around what might happen if they're guilty of doing some heinous thing to children. it is going to simply be, I'm not dealing with it. And, I won't deal with them. That's just how it is. Um, even though he signed it, this message is not over, right? Now, Donald Trump had come out publicly and saying he was going to, or he wanted the Republicans to um, sign the Epstein files. And that's how we got here, right? First, we needed the discharge petition to even bring it up for a vote. And only 4 Republicans were willing to agree to go around the Speaker of the House and force a vote on this. But this whole situation didn't even need to happen. Not at all. Why? Well, look at how the vote went in the House of Representatives and the Senate. Okay, they brought forward, once they got the discharge petition, and they forced the Speaker of the House to table it. We started hearing about members of Congress breaking from Donald Trump, and because he was still at that point saying, "Don't vote for it, kill the bill," etc. But then we started hearing it was going to be 4, 6, 10, 20. Slowly, the numbers start creeping up as we started speculating it could be up to 100. Then they hold the vote, and it was 427 to 1 when they passed the Epstein file resolution. Well, they didn't need to do this discharge petition then. They really didn't. If it was going to pass with that kind of support, why did Mike Johnson keep it hidden? Why was he refusing to bring it to the floor for a vote? Well, because it wasn't going to pass initially. But as the vote actually looked like it was going to happen, these politicians realized, oh shit, we have to answer for this. We have to deal with it. And we have to go ahead and go back to our districts and try to get reelected. And if we vote to keep the files hidden, it is going to be bad for us. So we're going to have to vote for it. And then Donald Trump saw that he was going to probably have it pass the House with a veto proof majority. And he went, oh shit. So he came out and tried to mitigate the damage and said, go ahead and vote for it. Go ahead and vote for it. So then they were okay with signing it. And only one Republican said no. And that was Clay Higgins of Louisiana. And he comes out with this bullshit excuse of, well, the House Oversight Committee is already looking into Epstein. And that because the House Oversight Committee is looking into it, it'll jeopardize the oversight investigation. Except the Oversight Committee is still, as they are doing their investigation, they are releasing files to the general public. So that doesn't entirely work. But we didn't even need to get here. If it was going to pass 427 to 1, they should have just pulled it up for a vote, 2 months ago and gone with it. But see, the math was different then because in part we hadn't had the November elections where Republicans got their asses kicked all across the country. You had Mamdani win in New York, which was expected, but not by the margins he won. The governor of New Jersey and Virginia won by bigger margins than what they expected. But then you go to places like, was it Mississippi, where they flipped 3 Senate seats in the state legislature and broke the supermajority that has been in place for like 12 years. Our friend Will comments about how the Georgia Regulatory Board, I think that these board members have basically always been Republican. They've always had Republicans and rarely ever have a Democrat running to be in those positions. And they flipped 2 seats, which is huge considering that they never win. A Democrat never wins, and they won statewide in Georgia. It sends signals to Republicans in Congress going, oh shit, the tide is turning and we have to do something here. Between that, the government shutdown fight that they didn't win, and how bad it looked for them by not swearing in Representative Grijalva when she was going to be the final vote on the discharge petition. It's all things that made them change their mind and change how they voted with this whole situation. Now, some people are saying that it is going to be, the files are going to be completely scrubbed, right? I just don't know that they can scrub them that well. Now, they are trying to say, or some people are suggesting anyway, that it could be scrubbed of anybody that is a Republican, all foreign leaders, all these kinds of things. Except that, like I said, there are freedom of information lawsuits that could come out because of this, where they would have to prove that the things they are redacting actually, need to be redacted. But also, these aren't the only copies, right? The DOJ doesn't have the originals of all of the information. And as this stuff comes out, we're already hearing several members of Congress saying, well, if the DOJ fucks around with this too bad, that they will turn around and start reading lists of names on the House floor. Those include Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie. That they said, well, we'll get a list of uh, perpetrators from and clients of Epstein from the victims, and we'll just read it on the House floor. And that alone would be damning to anybody that's in there. And if it looks like things are being covered up, there is going to be issues with that. It's not going to end well. Now, how does this all end for Donald Trump? Well, this is the beginning of the end of Donald Trump as president, and as head of the Republican Party. Them breaking like this, I think, signals to him that he is on the way out. And that is part of why his response has been what it has been. Right after he comes out and says he's going to sign it when the Senate passes it, one of the things he took to Truth Social to talk about was to remind Republicans of all of the things he has done to help them win since becoming president, to remind them about all of the winning that they've done. And he spent a lot of time yesterday tweeting and talking about all of his legislative successes, all the things he's done this term that have made America great again, and how much better things are under him than Joe Biden. Now, none of that's true. He hasn't really had any successes, and most things are worse than they were under Joe Biden. But he's doing that because he feels his grip on the Republican Party slipping away. If they try to redact the files, too bad, and the truth will come out regardless of how they try to redact it. That could be the bridge too far for Republicans, and they use the files to get rid of Donald Trump. They could also use just him being connected to Epstein as a way to get rid of Donald Trump. Now, was in a live last night, and one of the guests or one of the people in the live chat had actually corrected me. I said, we're coming up on primary season for the 2026 midterms. And I wasn't sure if it was January, February, or March, and they said it was early March. I don't remember the exact date. Is when one of the first primary votes is. Well, they could be starting to look at getting rid of Donald Trump ahead of primary season, trying to make sure they don't get primaried out and they don't lose their jobs to get to primary challengers that are supported by Donald Trump. But something also to watch with primary season is, do any of the Trump-backed primary challengers actually win? And that is going to be a sign of how much power he still has over the Republican voting base and how much power he has over the Republican Party as a whole. Now, with that being said, Donald Trump is worried about what is going to happen here. Okay, how could the Republicans turn on him? Well, as it starts to come out, we have the clock is ticking with this month before Pam Bondi has to release the files. Okay, and then you probably have about a month of people digging through the files. As all of that is going on, Republicans are probably starting to meet behind closed doors. Now, we may not hear about the contents of these meetings because they have private meetings all the time. And they won't, unless there's a hot mic or somebody slips a recording device in or whatever, we're not going to hear the full details of these meetings, but I think the conversations are going to be going on between Senate Republicans, Senate Democrats, and congressional or House of Representatives Republicans about removing Donald Trump, trying to figure out where they have the votes and are they there? Or can they get going with getting rid of Donald Trump? Because if the House of Representatives moves to remove Donald Trump, they will do it only if they know they have the votes in the Senate. I just do not think that they will make an attempt to get rid of Donald Trump without knowing for sure that they can actually pass it. Okay. Why would they make the attempt to get rid of him only to have it fail in the Senate and move against the leader of their own party or their own president from their own party? Now, I mean, you could say that it would be the right thing to do, but since when do the Republicans do the right thing? If they did the right thing, January of 2021, when he was impeached the last time for the events of January 6th, they would have voted to convict and we wouldn't be here anyway. So, how does this end for Donald Trump? Well, they could make him the same offer they made Nixon. And once they know they have the votes, they could go to Donald Trump and they could say, hey, look, Donald, you need to resign and come up with a reason, save some face, resign, or we're going to impeach and remove you. And they could do it. Now, Donald Trump's ego, I don't think, would allow him to do that unless he gets something out of it. And the only thing they could really dangle in front of him is J.D. Vance doing the exact same thing that Ford did to Nixon, and that being issuing a pardon. Now, he could get pardoned federally for any and all of his crimes. That's possible by J.D. Vance. That would be a politically bad move for J.D. Vance, but he could do it. And maybe Donald Trump resigns. But I think just the stress of all of that and the stress of these files is not going to be good for Donald Trump. He is not in good health. We keep hearing about how bad he is doing. He may not survive on his own until the midterms, let alone the end of his term. But I don't think the Republicans will let him stand as the head of their party. They may either decide to remove him themselves. I mean, they've already been talking about how if the Democrats win the House of Representatives in the midterms, that was initially one of their talking points, right? Well, if we let the Democrats win the House, they're going to impeach and remove Donald Trump. Well, unless they have a supermajority in the Senate, they're going to need Republican support. So it's entirely possible that the other option they have is they wait until after the midterms, let the Democrats lead the impeachment charge, and just go along with it and remove him that way. Now, all of this is because they are looking at either the midterms or at 2028 going, well, we have to do something to shore up ourselves to make sure that we have a chance to win, right? They want to win. Now, that being said, their idea, one of the things they could run on, and I don't know if it would work with the electorate anymore, because there's a lot of voters that are asking the hard questions. A lot of the younger voters my age and younger, Gen X effectively and younger, are saying how, right? Because the old way what they would have ran on was, well, hey, like if they replaced Donald Trump ahead of the midterms, they would say, well, make sure you give J.D. Vance a Republican Congress so he can get to work because he's got to still finish fixing everything from Joe Biden. And we'd say how, right? And they'd come back with, well, no, we're just going to be able to fix it. And that used to work. It's not working as a strategy right now. But one of the things that Democrats need to work on is messaging out a good message and not just coming across as global elites or well-educated, snobby people looking down their nose. I'll get to that in a minute. But see, that's what I was saying is they could try to say with J.D. Vance, well, you need to give him a Republican-controlled Congress for 2 years, and you know, let us give him a chance to actually get stuff done. And a message like that used to work, but now we're asking how. Same problem would be out asking in 2028 if he becomes president ahead of it is, well, you got to give JD Vance a chance. Democrats had control of the midterms, assuming they win, like I think they would. So Democrats had the Congress. He couldn't pass anything. Oh, you got to give him another 4 years and give us control of Congress again. And oh, we'll fix it. We'll get it fixed because the Democrats won't be there blocking us. They won't actually say how, but that is their message, right? The only message they really have had lately has been culture war bullshit and immigration and stuff like that. They haven't had any sort of decent strategy or decent plan, and everything they've done has backfired. So they need to come up with something, and using sympathy of, well, this guy couldn't actually get anything accomplished, um, could be one way to do that. Now, I was talking about um, the Democrats and their messaging. And one of the things we were talking about, I was in Will's live last night, and one of the things we'd been talking about was Democrats and their messaging. And Will made a good point. I'm going to give credit to Will. He said if you're a Democrat out in a rural area talking to farmers, he goes, you don't need to come in with a complicated message. And I think that's part of the problem with Democrats is sometimes their messaging comes out, you know, too complicated. Donald Trump was great at messaging out things that they were going to do. Didn't matter if it was going to make sense, right? That somehow locking up Hillary Clinton was going to fix all the world's problems. Didn't make sense, but it was simple and people latched onto it. Well, one of the things Will said was you could come out to these rural areas and go, hey, I'm a Democrat running to represent you. Okay. Have you made money under the Republicans lately? No. Okay. Did you make money the last time the Democrats were in office as in the presidency? Yeah. Okay. Well, what if I vote for me? I'll make you money. That's a simple message, right? And that is something that I think a lot of the farmers could get behind. You break it down to something simple. I'm going to make you money. And if they start asking how, then you get into the weeds of, well, one thing you could say is I'm going to restore USAID, the foreign aid arm of the U.S. government. And it was one of the things Donald Trump got rid of. And in the process of doing this, he fucked over farmers. How? Well, part of the requirements for USAID requires that any food be purchased from American farmers first when possible. Now, there are limitations, right? Like there are things we just can't grow here. So if you're trying to do something in aid and you need you're trying to give out certain fruits and veggies that we can't grow, that's different. And that's where they have to go buy them from foreign countries. But if you're just doing grains or corn or wheat or what have you, right? Maybe soybeans, something like that, and you're giving it out in aid, the requirement under the law was that they bought from Americans first. And as J.D. Farmer, one of the other people that are routinely on the Rational Boomers lives, and one of the guests and stuff, he's a farmer from Illinois. He was talking about it. He's a younger guy, but he understands the business. And he was saying that a lot of times with USAID, you had your crop sold before you ever put the seed in the ground. You had an idea of what your yield was going to be, presuming that you had a good year, didn't get flooded out, you didn't get hailed out or something like that. But you knew if that field came through, and if those other things happened, you had crop insurance to offset the difference. But if you brought it to market and it all grew the way you thought, you had basically all of it sold, presuming you got the yield you wanted. Now, if you got a bigger yield, maybe you had some left over, but the bulk of it was you had it all sold and you knew how much you were going to get for it. And then when it came time to go sell, you were covered, you were done. I mean, if you're in business, and technically farming is a business, like Will said last night on the live, um, you know, and you have, before you've even made your product, if you already know it's sold, isn't that a good thing? Right? Um, so like if you know you've got your product already sold, that's a good thing, right? And these farmers are now facing uncertainty. They plant fields, acres and acres of crops. And if they don't know what price they're going to get till the end of the year, that's horrible. Now, maybe USAID doesn't necessarily pay as good as what they may get at the end of the year. But if it's a guaranteed sale and you're done with it, gives you an idea of where you're making your money, right? Same with, China. China's not producing. China's not buying right now from America because of Donald Trump and his tariff wars. Now, they hadn't bought any soybeans all year. And I wish I could remember which representative it was. I think it was one here in Iowa, but I could be wrong. Um, they were doing a town hall and was talking about how, well, Donald Trump has got this trade deal and China promises to buy all of these soybeans from us or whatever. And this farmer in the crowd yells, "When?" Because they're not waiting. You know what I mean? They're not selling any product. They're not getting the price. The price is going down because they don't have that guaranteed buy. And then you add in the dipshit that is RFK Jr. wanting to get rid of high fructose corn syrup. Again, farmers plant an amount of corn. I think it is like 10-ish% of the entire crop across the country of corn is pre-designed or pre-planned to be in for high fructose corn syrup. And he wants to do away with it. He wants to limit it, etc. Well, that changes, what they are planting. Again, if they have contracts for every year to produce so much corn to go to whichever company to make corn syrup, same with ethanol or whatever, that's all, pre-built money, guaranteed money is always better than, well, I might make money later on. This whole thing, this administration is not helping the farmer. And if the Democrats come out and run for 26 and 28 on a message of being able to make the farmers money, they could win in some very red, very rural states. And Donald Trump was always good at running a message. And that was the problem of Democrats, right? Kamala Harris had good plans, but a lot of her plans got lost in the messaging because and this is not a knock on Kamala Harris, but she's well educated and she sounds polished, well educated. Well, way more than Donald Trump anyway. If the message would have been simple, she probably would have had a better chance. The other problem that was with, and it's not just her campaign, this would have been anybody who ran against Donald Trump. The problem with running against Donald Trump is there is so much negative about Donald Trump, you have to talk about all of the negative about Donald Trump. And her message about doing things to help everyday Americans got lost because of how bad Donald Trump is. Okay? That's where everything kind of fell apart. So Democrats need to do a better job at messaging, and they need to get out there. Now, if they do things right, I have been saying for a long time, and I believe this, if they come out with an FDR style candidate after Donald Trump is gone, and they run on a campaign of fixing things for the everyday American, And I realize waiting till 2028 is a long time for this economy to be this shitty. Now, hopefully, there is a path for them to gain some control in Congress. And if Donald Trump goes by the wayside, maybe we can fix some of the things in the short term, even with a President J.D. Vance. Um, but they need to run on fixing the economy for everyday Americans. And they need to focus on doing all of those things. And I think that would actually make things better. Now, uh, you know, Democrats just need to do a better job of messaging their ideas and their ideologies. Um, but I think they have a good chance at winning the midterms. They have a good chance of flipping a lot of seats coming up. It, if they run on a good message, especially one about affordability, especially with this administration wanting to just say, well, everything's cheaper. They can't, they're not winning that anymore. They're not able to just say it's coming down now because prices aren't. They're going up everywhere. And even some of the hard hitting uh, Republicans, the hardcore MAGAs, who normally would say, well, things are a little high here, but they must be going down nationwide. It just hasn't got here yet, is saying, oh shit, this isn't working out. We got to do something different here. So the tide's turning against Donald Trump and the Republican Party, and it is setting up the possibility that if the Democrats do it right, they could have control of Congress for a generation. And if they keep doing things right, you know, that is part of how FDR and the Democrats, and then the Democrats post FDR had control of Washington D.C. for over 20 years, right? They did things right. They fixed the problems that were caused by Republicans by their apathy to the Great Depression. They said, well, it's going to fix itself. And that's not the case, right? It's not going to fix itself. They have to actively take measures to fix the problems that are wrong here. Now, I've been talking a lot about Donald Trump going by the wayside and what happens if JD Vance has to become president, or how the Republicans may message a JD Vance presidency. Well, people are wondering, what is JD Vance going to do as president? And I think he's going to do several things. First and foremost, he is going to listen to advisors. He is going to be much more calm. And I think he is going to not pull the Donald Trump card of, governing by tweet and, acting like a toddler and throwing temper tantrums. He's going to make politics slightly boring. Maybe not quite as boring as it was under Joe Biden, um, but it's going to go back to being less interesting. We won't have as much to talk about. The other thing he's going to do is he is going to be trying to float under the radar, especially if Congress has just impeached and removed a member of his own party, right? Especially if Republicans are still in power when they do it. He's going to want to stay under the radar and um, go ahead with it and just coast, right? He's not going to try to make too many waves. He's not going to do the crazy shit because he's going to be afraid that Congress would do the same thing. Now, some people are suggesting that the whole idea would be to get rid of Trump, bring in Vance. Vance brings in a reasonable, moderate Republican, and then they at some point get rid of Vance to have an incumbent, reasonable Republican who can just go, how the fuck did I get here? And go forward like that. Well, I don't think that's going to happen unless they have good charges against Vance, because the Republicans uh, won't be able to sell the Democrats on going with it, right? Like if the Democrats see what the Republicans are trying to do and that this is just a political strategy, they won't back it. Now, if they think it is justified, like if they have something big on JD Vance, then sure, they would go along with it. Um, But JD's going to fly under the radar. But one of the big things he's going to do, and it may not be all at once, but he is going to be slowly working on getting rid of everybody that is in that cabinet, except maybe Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio seems to be about the only one who is qualified for his position, and he hasn't done too many negative things as Secretary of State. He himself has kind of flown under the radar because there are so many other clowns in other positions. I don't think JD Vance sticks with people like RFK Jr., Dr. Oz, Linda McMahon, Pam Bondi, and they're going to be gone. And those people that are going to be gone now, I don't think this would happen under the Vance administration. But for all of the things that have gone on that they have done, there will ultimately come a reckoning. And when that happens, there's going to be investigations and there are probably going to be charges brought. And none of them are safe because they don't have immunity like Donald Trump thinks he does. Now, that immunity ruling only applies to official acts of the president. It doesn't apply to things that are blatantly illegal, and it doesn't apply to things that are done as Donald Trump, the private citizen. It just sets a higher bar. Ooh, excuse me, for the Republicans or for the prosecutors to prove that he was acting in private capacity, not as president of the United States. So this immunity thing would not apply to Pam Bondi or Kash Patel or any of them. And they're going to have all kinds of problems, including Kristi Noem and her ICE agents. Now, we're hearing about some of the things going on with these ICE agents, and they're getting pushback, that they never expected. Why? Because they're not actively doing police work. They're not trained. They're thugs, right? They're just going in, rounding up anybody speaking Spanish or who looks like they may be an immigrant, and said, "Well, we're going to round you up first, ask questions, deal with it later." They're operating without warrants. They're operating without any sort of due process. And as I was talking with a coworker of mine um, earlier this week, she was asking about this, and I said, "Okay." I compared it to her. I said, "Now, obviously, you aren't going to be the type of person that uh, these ICE agents would go after because, she looks like me, right? You know what I mean? She doesn't have the right skin tone for what these ICE agents are going after. She doesn't speak Spanish or any other language but English. They're going to leave her alone." But I said, "How would you prove if an ICE agent came up to you and said, 'You're here illegally, you're going back, we're sending you to uh, Guatemala or Honduras or something like that?'" She goes, "Well, I'd give them my ID. What if they said it was a fake? How would you prove you are you, right?" She goes, "Well, I don't know, maybe with my birth certificate in front of a judge." "Well, what if you don't have a hearing?" She goes, "What?" I go, "That's what they're doing." She had no idea that these people aren't even getting the hearings for a chance to prove their citizenship or their legality for being here. And that's when we're talking due process, that's exactly what we mean here. You know, and I think where Republican voters and MAGAs get wrapped up in this, well, they don't deserve due process. At least some of them hear the word due and they think we're giving them something, like it's a bill, like we're handing them money, right? At least some. They are entitled to at least the same protections that we are. If I get picked up by ICE for whatever reason, and again, I don't think I'm not the right skin type, I'm not the right demographic that they are looking for. But if they don't give me a chance to prove, how I was here, where I was born, etc., how do they know for sure that I am an undocumented immigrant? They don't. It's guesswork at that point. So you're dealing with that. And I think all of those people that are doing all of these things, they're ultimately going to be facing a lot of problems when we get back in charge. There's going to be investigations. There's going to be charges coming, and Donald Trump isn't going to pardon most of these people. If they're waiting for him to pardon him, like on the last minute of the last day, it's not going to happen. In part because there's nothing in it for Donald Trump, and two, I don't expect him to make it that long. Now, one of the reasons I don't expect Donald Trump to make it that long is he's not in the best of health. If you look at him, look at how he's looking paler. He's looking kind of gray at times. He looks disheveled. He's dragging his one foot at times, which can be an indication of a stroke. Because as I've talked about, depending on where the stroke happened in the brain and if there is any sort of brain damage, you lose the ability to